I stood there, holding my fishing pole like a criminal caught red-handed. The wind was soft, the lake still, and the sun had barely kissed the water. It was supposed to be my escape, my quiet morning before a week of deadlines. But instead, Sharon Fletcher, president of the HOA, stormed down the grassy hill like she was raiding a drug den. "You can't fish here, Mr. Marlowe. You violated HOA Code 7.12b, she shouted, flipping her blonde bob like she was proud of knowing the number. Then came the envelope, a $10,000 fine. For fishing. In a lake I thought was part of nature. Before we continue, please drop a like and comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Australia, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back, tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story." I stared at her, speechless. The same woman who waved when her dog pooped on my lawn. I thought it was a joke at first, some exaggerated warning. But she shoved the notice in my hand, smiling smug like she just scored a win. "This isn't a campground," she sneered. "We don't allow unsanctioned activities." I opened the envelope slowly, my fingers shaking. My name. My address. HOA seal. $10,000. $10,000 for casting a line in water that I'd sat beside since I moved in 6 years ago. That's when I knew they weren't done. They were just getting started. I went home in a daze. My garage still smelled of motor oil and old fishing lures. The lake sat just 40 feet behind my backyard, what I thought was a perk when I bought the house. No one told me the HOA had ownership. No one explained you needed a permit to breathe near it. I thought about calling my brother, but he'd warned me about HOAs long ago. "They're dictators with clipboards," he'd said. I used to laugh. Now I wasn't laughing. I was angry, humiliated, and 10 grand lighter, unless I fought back. The letter gave me 7 days to pay or face collections. Collections? Like I was some deadbeat. I walked back to the lake that evening, barefoot, holding a cold beer, watching the sunset glaze the water. That's when I noticed the new sign. Private HOA property, no trespassing. Fines enforced. Nailed into the same tree my daughter used to hang her tire swing from. I clenched the bottle. They'd taken something that felt like mine and twisted it into their little kingdom. It wasn't about fishing. It was about power. And I'd just become their target. That night, I dug out the HOA agreement I'd signed when I moved in. 30 pages of rules, codes, subcodes. Somewhere between lawn heights and mailbox colors, I found the lake clause. Shared community feature regulated by HOA with usage restrictions. They'd technically covered themselves. My stomach dropped. They had me. And Sharon knew it. I called the HOA office the next morning, trying to reason. "Mr. Marlowe," the receptionist said coolly, "violations are non-negotiable. You should have read your covenant packet." She hung up before I could respond. That's when it hit me, I wasn't dealing with neighbors. I was dealing with a cartel. I went to the next HOA meeting, held in the clubhouse that my dues helped fund. Everyone was there, Sharon, her lapdog vice president Greg, and about 30 others who mostly came for the cookies. I raised my hand. "I want to contest this fishing fine," I said firmly. Sharon didn't even let me finish. "It's not up for discussion," she snapped. "You broke the rule. End of story." Her friends nodded like bobbleheads. That's when I saw Greg smirk at another board member and mouth, "He thought he could fish." That smirk burned into me. When I walked out of that clubhouse, something in me cracked. Not from defeat, but from clarity. I wasn't just going to pay the fine and walk away. I was going to fight back. I sat on my porch that night, flipping through Zillow listings on my phone, sipping whiskey, and staring at the lake. I knew something they didn't. My late uncle had been a county land surveyor. I still had some of his files in the attic. If the land under the lake didn't actually belong to the HOA, and they were bluffing, I had a shot. The next morning, I climbed up to the attic, dust choking my lungs. It took 2 hours, but I found the folder labeled Ridge Lake Subdivision, Pre-Development Maps. I laid it out on my garage floor like I was cracking open treasure. And there it was. The lake, marked as pending parcel, privately owned. Not HOA land. I blinked. My heart raced. The HOA hadn't owned the lake. They'd leased access when the subdivision was built, but never purchased it. That meant the original owners still had it, or their estate. My hands trembled. The paper gave a name I hadn't heard in 20 years. I tracked the name to a small address in Dalton, Georgia. Turns out, the owner passed away in 2009. No kids. No will. The land reverted to the county, sitting idle, unclaimed, and forgotten, which meant it was still for sale. I called the county office the next morning, voice shaking. I'm interested in parcel 748L. The lake behind Ridge Lake Estates. The woman paused. That's been off our radar for years. You're lucky, it's unzoned. We'd be happy to sell. How much? I asked. $26,000, she said. I almost dropped the phone. $26,000. That was nearly the same cost as paying 2 more of those ridiculous fines. I had the money in savings. It was my emergency fund. But now, this was the emergency. I didn't sleep that night. My brain was on fire. I imagined the look on Sharon's face. The HOA sign being torn down. Me fishing in peace. My daughter hanging that tire swing back up. This wasn't just revenge. This was justice. And the kind only a lake deed could bring. I wired the money that Friday. Signed every document. Registered it under Marlowe Enterprises LLC. And waited for the title. When it arrived in the mail a week later, I drove straight to the HOA office, copies in hand, and asked for Sharon. She's in a meeting, they said. Not anymore, I replied. I walked right into the conference room, placed the title deed on the table, and smiled. I own the lake now, I said calmly. Sharon's jaw dropped. Excuse me? You heard me. That lake you find me over? I bought it. She blinked like her world had tilted. And that's when I leaned in, steady and slow, and said the words that shook the room. Effective immediately, Ridge Lake residents are banned from entering my property. That includes the water. The very next morning, my phone buzzed with a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring. Then a voicemail came in. I pressed play. This is Sharon Fletcher with Ridge Lake Estates HOA. Mr. Marlowe, we need to discuss your recent property acquisition. We're requesting an emergency board meeting this evening at 7 p.m. in the clubhouse. Please attend. Her voice had lost its smug edge. Now it was clipped, formal, rattled. I took a slow sip of coffee and smiled. For once, they weren't in control. I was. And they knew it. By 6:45 p.m., the clubhouse parking lot was packed. Cars lined the curbs. Homeowners stood outside whispering like it was some town scandal, which, in a way, it was. I walked in holding a black folder with copies of the deed. Everyone turned when I entered, their eyes bouncing between curiosity and suspicion. Sharon stood near the front, jaw clenched, her usual bright lipstick looking faded. Let's come to order, she said. The room settled. We have a situation regarding Lake Marlowe. She stopped herself. I mean, the lake formerly under HOA oversight. Sharon cleared her throat and addressed the room like a courtroom attorney. Mr. Marlowe has recently purchased the body of water behind our community, she began. While this may seem unusual, we believe there are community use rights in place, which may supersede private ownership. Murmurs spread through the room. I stood up, slowly. Not true, I said. This land was never owned by the HOA. You leased it but never completed a purchase. And according to the county, there are no public rights granted to this subdivision. It's now private property. A man named Douglas raised his hand. Wait, you can really block us from the lake? I nodded. Same way they fine me 10 grand for fishing. It's called enforcement. Gasps filled the air. Sharon slammed her clipboard down. Mr. Marlowe, this is a community. You can't just cut us off like that. I shrugged. You didn't seem concerned about community when you fined me $10,000 for doing what children do at summer camp. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. And if one more person trespasses, I'll treat it the same way you treated me, with legal action. Greg, her vice president, chimed in. Isn't this a bit extreme, Clint? His tone was suddenly friendly, like we were old high school buddies. You could have just asked us to lift the fine. I smiled coldly. I did. You laughed. You smirked. And you dismissed me in front of 30 people. I turned to the rest of the room. Let me be clear, I didn't do this to be petty. I did this because someone needed to stand up to your iron rule. If you can't respect the people who live here, then don't expect their cooperation. After the meeting, people came up to me in the parking lot, quietly, like I was some local celebrity. Honestly, Clint, I think what you did was brave, whispered an older woman named Patty. Sharon's been bullying people for years. Another neighbor, Justin, muttered, she made me tear down my shed because it was 2 inches too tall. 2 inches. I nodded and thanked them, but kept my face unreadable. I wasn't looking for applause. I was looking for change. And if the lake was my lever, I was going to use it. By the next week, the mood in Ridge Lake had shifted. No more early morning walkers circling the lake. No kids skipping rocks on the shore. Sharon had sent out a newsletter warning residents to avoid engaging with the lake's new owner. As if I was radioactive. She even tried to request that the board rezone the lake as a public feature. But the county shut her down. Private land is private land, the zoning officer told her. There's no gray area here. And just like that, the lake became my fortress. Then came the drone. One Saturday morning, I saw a little buzzing object flying low over the water. It had a Ridge Lake HOA sticker on the side, amateur surveillance. I pulled out my phone and filmed it. Then I filed a privacy complaint with the FAA. The drone disappeared 2 days later. That same week, Sharon sent me a letter claiming my ban was creating emotional distress among residents. I wrote back on official Marlowe Enterprises LLC letterhead, your emotional distress is not my liability. Please respect property boundaries. Trespassers will be prosecuted. I signed it with a smiley face. That's when the retaliation started. One morning, I found a dead catfish nailed to my fence with a note that said, "Go fish somewhere else." Another time, someone spray-painted "traitor" on my trash bins. I filed police reports, installed cameras, and posted signs. Private property. Monitored 24/7. Still, the harassment didn't stop. But I didn't flinch. Because the more they tried to punish me, the more they proved my point. I wasn't the villain. I was the mirror, reflecting their pettiness back at them. And it was driving them wild. I decided to take it one step further. I installed a beautiful wooden dock, just for me. I painted it bright red so you could see it from every window in the subdivision. Every Sunday, I'd sit out there with my fishing pole, cooler full of beer, and a little Bluetooth speaker playing country music. Sometimes I didn't even cast a line. I just sat there, waving at the windows I knew they were peeking through. My peace was now a protest. And every peaceful hour was revenge. But then came the unexpected blow. I got a letter from a law firm, Ridge Lake HOA versus Clint Marlowe, civil action number 7,758 gallons. They were suing me, claiming that my ban on lake access was unreasonable, that it violated community harmony. They were actually suing me for enforcing property rights they themselves had used to fine me. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. My stomach churned. But I wasn't scared. Not this time. I had something they didn't. Documentation, proof, and a story so absurd that even the judge would raise an eyebrow. I called up my old college roommate, Jalen, who now worked as a litigation attorney in Atlanta. I told him everything. He laughed so hard he had to put me on mute. "Clint," he said, "you realize you might be the first man in Georgia to buy a lake out of spite?" I chuckled. "Yeah, and hopefully the last to be fined 10 grand for a worm on a hook." He agreed to represent me pro bono. "This case," he said, "is too juicy to pass up." The courthouse in downtown Helena Springs wasn't used to HOA disputes that turned into community-wide dramas. But that's exactly what this had become. By the time the hearing date arrived, local reporters were lined up outside. "Man buys lake to get back at HOA," the headlines read. Even Channel 8 sent a camera crew. I walked into that courtroom with Jalen by my side, cool as ever in his tailored gray suit. "Let them play games," he whispered. "We're here to win a war." And I believed him. Sharon sat at the plaintiff's table, lips tight, A pearl necklace clamped around her throat like a noose. Beside her was Ridgelake's lawyer, a man who looked more like an overpriced golf caddy than legal counsel. They had binders, charts, even a slideshow queued up. When the judge entered, silence dropped like a hammer. "Let's begin," he said, dry and stern. Sharon's lawyer launched into a speech about neighborhood unity, shared expectations, and abuse of ownership. He said I had weaponized private property and disrupted the community fabric. Jalen just smiled. "Your Honor, let me show you a map." Jalen pulled out the original survey from 2004. "This map predates Ridgelake," he explained. "The lake was never HOA property. It was leased but never purchased." He passed copies to the court. "Here's the deed. County sale. Fully registered. My client now owns this land fair and legal." The judge nodded. "I see." Then Jalen added, "Furthermore, the HOA fined my client $10,000 for fishing on a lake they didn't own. That's fraud, Your Honor. Plain and simple." Sharon's face turned red. She whispered frantically to her lawyer, but it was too late. The judge was listening. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Marlowe, did you warn the HOA after discovering you'd purchased the lake?" I nodded. "I informed them in writing. Multiple times. They continued to harass me, including unauthorized drone flights and personal property vandalism." I showed him the photos. The dead fish. The spray-painted trash bins. The FAA complaint. The judge raised his brows. "Did you file police reports?" "3, I replied. "All documented." His gavel tapped. "This is no longer just a property matter. It's a pattern of targeted harassment." Sharon looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Then Jalen dropped the real bomb. "We are filing a countersuit for emotional damages and property invasion, totaling $50,000. My client also seeks a public retraction of the HOA's fine and a formal apology in the Ridgelake newsletter." The courtroom stirred. Sharon gasped. "This is outrageous," she yelled. "He's manipulating the system." But the judge held up his hand. "You fined a man $10,000 for fishing. Then you escalated into harassment. I suggest you take the offer seriously." Her lawyer requested a recess. The judge granted 10 minutes. I stepped outside into the sun, heart pounding. I stood by the courthouse steps while neighbors gathered around. Some had taken off work just to witness it. "Clint, you're doing what none of us could," one woman said. "You're finally standing up to them." A man named Carlos from 2 blocks down added, "She made me repaint my entire house because the shade of blue wasn't warm enough." "You're our hero." I never saw myself as a hero. I was just a man who loved to fish. But maybe that's all it takes, someone fed up enough to cast the first stone in the pond. Back in court, Sharon's side returned looking pale. Her lawyer addressed the room. After discussion, the Ridgelake HOA is prepared to settle. They will retract the fishing fine, issue a formal apology, and cease all attempts to claim usage rights to the lake. The judge raised an eyebrow. "And the damages?" Sharon's lawyer hesitated. "We will pay a portion, $10,000. The same amount they'd fined me." Jalen stood. "We accept the settlement, on one condition. That the apology be handwritten. By Mrs. Fletcher." The pause. Sharon's mouth fell open. The room erupted in a soft gasp. The judge agreed. "I'll allow it. This court is adjourned." The gavel slammed. Just like that, it was over. Or so I thought. Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed. "Mr. Marlowe, how does it feel to beat your HOA?" someone shouted. "Will you be opening the lake again to the neighborhood?" another asked. I looked right at the camera and said, "The lake is mine. And peace is priceless." I didn't give them more. I didn't need to. Sharon walked past me with her head down, her pearl necklace trembling slightly. I didn't gloat. I didn't sneer. I simply nodded and walked away. But the war wasn't done. Not yet. A few days later, I received the apology. Sharon had written it in cursive on thick cardstock. "To Mr. Clint Marlowe, I apologize for the unjust fine and overreach regarding the lake. I acknowledge your rightful ownership and commit to respecting your boundaries. Sincerely, Sharon Fletcher. I framed it, hung it right over my fireplace. But it was what came next that truly stunned me. A letter from the Ridge Lake Board itself, signed by 3 members. We want to remove Sharon as president. Will you support us? They wanted me on the board. The letter asking me to support Sharon's removal sat on my kitchen table for 3 days. I read it twice a day, trying to decide whether I wanted to be part of the system I just embarrassed. The Ridge Lake Board wanted me on their side now, not because they liked me, but because they feared losing control. Sharon's rule had turned them into villains, and now that the community was turning on them, they needed a new poster boy. And I guess when you buy a lake out of spite, you become that guy. I didn't give them a yes. I gave them a meeting. I invited the 3 board members who signed the letter, Terry, Liza, and Brant, to my backyard for a cookout. No pressure. Just burgers, beer, and questions. They showed up tense, like they were walking into a job interview. I handed them drinks and gestured to the lake. Beautiful, isn't it? I said. Too bad the view's blocked by resentment. Terry, the quietest of them, finally spoke. Clint, we messed up. Sharon's leadership has been hostile. And we let her get away with too much. Liza nodded. She steamrolled everyone. She forced Greg into compliance. We voted on things we didn't even agree with, just to keep her from going nuclear. I took a long sip of beer. So now you want me to help you fire her? Brant leaned forward. Not fire. Replace. With someone who understands fairness. We're asking you to run for HOA president. I nearly choked on my drink. President? After everything? You do realize I just banned the entire neighborhood from a lake, I said. That's exactly why people trust you, Liza replied. Because you did what they wish they could. I didn't give them an answer that night. But I did sleep with the windows open, the sound of frogs on the lake echoing like slow applause. The next day, I walked through the neighborhood. Not as a rebel, but as a quiet observer. I passed Patty trimming her roses. Justin painting his porch. The Miller twins playing basketball in their driveway. Every single one of them waved. We're rooting for you, someone whispered. That night I texted Liza 2 words, let's win. We planned the coup like a campaign. Quietly. Legally. Powerfully. Ridge Lake's bylaws allowed for a special election if 35% of residents signed a petition for leadership review. Liza handled the paperwork. Brant coordinated volunteers. I just showed up with a clipboard and listened to people vent. And vent they did. About Sharon rejecting Christmas lights. About Greg banning a kid's lemonade stand. About fines for mismatched curtains. It's like living in a prison with lawns, one woman told me. By week's end, we had enough signatures to trigger a vote. The date was set, August 15th. Sharon, of course, went ballistic. She called an urgent community forum at the clubhouse, hoping to rally sympathy. I went, sat in the back, watched her pace like a lioness whose cage had been rattled. This is a coordinated attack on structure, she shouted. Do you want chaos? Lawns full of weeds? Boats and driveways? This man, she pointed straight at me, has turned this place into a circus. I stood slowly. A circus where people are finally laughing, I said calmly. The crowd clapped. Sharon turned pale. She had lost them, and she knew it. As the vote approached, campaign flyers began appearing in mailboxes. Vote Marlowe for president. Fairness. Freedom. Fishing. It started as a joke. But people took it seriously. Liza even printed shirts. A cartoon of me holding a fishing pole with the lake behind me. It spread like wildfire. Kids wore them. Teenagers asked for selfies. And the best part? Sharon couldn't stop it. The bylaws she once weaponized were now working against her. Every rule she'd clung to was now a stepping stone for her own downfall. The night of the vote, the clubhouse was packed like never before. Ballots were cast in hushed tones. I stood outside under the stars, not out of nerves, but peace. I didn't care if I won. I already had. The lake was quiet. The wind soft. The same place that had brought me shame was now my greatest power. At 9:23 p.m., Liza came out of the clubhouse holding the envelope. Clint, she said, smiling, you won. 73%. The crowd inside erupted. Someone started chanting my name. I didn't cheer. I just breathed. The next morning I walked to the clubhouse, now my office. Sharon had already cleared out her things. On the desk sat her resignation letter. Short, bitter, and unsigned. Typical. Greg had also stepped down. The board was mine now. But I didn't gloat. I held a meeting that night and invited everyone. I won't run this place like a kingdom, I told them. This is your neighborhood. Your lives. And I'll never fine you 10 grand for touching water. People laughed. People clapped. And for the first time in years, Ridge Lake felt like home. But then came an email. From a company I didn't recognize. Subject line: offer to purchase lake parcel. Someone wanted to buy my lake. For $500,000. The email sat unread for 10 minutes as I just stared at it. Subject: offer to purchase lake parcel, $500,000 US. I finally opened it. Dear Mr. Marlowe, we represent a private development firm interested in acquiring your lake property for residential enhancement purposes. Our client is prepared to offer $500,000 in cash, pending a 14-day closing. My hands went still on the keyboard. $500,000. $500,000. More than I paid for my entire house. For a lake I'd bought out of revenge. I closed the laptop and stepped out onto my red-painted dock. The water rippled softly. Kids' voices echoed faintly from yards down the hill. I thought about the first time I brought my daughter here after buying the house. She'd been 8, skipping rocks across the surface, yelling, "I beat you, Dad." I remembered the peace I used to feel on this dock, back before Sharon had made it a battlefield. This place wasn't just land, it was memory. But still, $500,000. That could fund a retirement, a boat, maybe a cabin in the mountains. I called Jalen that night. Legally, it's clean, he confirmed after reading the email. If you want out, Clint, this is a golden ticket. But only you can decide if peace is worth selling. I stayed up late thinking about it. The lake had won me the war. It gave me power, revenge, and even a community. But maybe it was time to let go. Let the lake go on its own journey, and I go on mine. Just as I began leaning toward, yes, I got a knock at my door. It was Patty, holding a pie. "Clint," she said, eyes misty, "I just wanted to say thank you. My grandkids are visiting next week, and I'd love to show them the lake. The real lake. Not a cemented condo project." I invited her in. We talked for over an hour. She told me how her late husband used to fish there before Ridge Lake was even built. "This place has soul," she said. "And you brought it back." When she left, I didn't go back to the email. I sat outside, watching fireflies blink across the dock, and realized I wasn't ready to sell. The next morning, I crafted a response. "Thank you for your offer. I respectfully decline. This lake is not for sale. Regards, Clint Marlowe." I hit send and didn't look back. That afternoon, I hosted a neighborhood gathering by the water. Kids fished. Adults brought folding chairs. People played music, grilled burgers, even danced a little. The lake wasn't just mine anymore, it was ours. I hadn't lifted the ban officially, but I'd opened the gate. And Ridge Lake showed up. 3 days later, a second offer came in, $650,000. This time, the developer added a sweetener, 15% of profits if the project turned into a luxury condo strip. But I didn't flinch. If they were that desperate, it meant I held something more valuable than money. So I did something bold. I printed their offer and stapled it to the new community bulletin board with a note. Tempting, but I'd rather leave a legacy than a condo. That night, Greg, former vice president and Sharon's old sidekick, knocked on my door. "Can we talk?" he asked, looking nervous. I poured him coffee and waited. "I voted for you," he finally said. After the court case, I realized Sharon didn't care about the people, just the power. He looked down. I followed her too long. "I'm sorry." I nodded. "Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is if you stay in them." He exhaled. "You think we could open a neighborhood fishing club? Kids need something real these days." I smiled. "Funny you mention that." The next board meeting, I proposed a new initiative. Ridge Lake Fishing and Conservation Club. No dues. No strict rules. Just Saturday mornings with poles and peace. The motion passed unanimously. We planned our first outing for the weekend. I ordered bait, cleaned the dock, even hung a new sign. Welcome to Marlow Lake. Cast your line, leave your stress. The neighborhood responded in a way I didn't expect. Families I'd never spoken to came forward to volunteer. Teenagers offered to run cleanup shifts. Elderly residents told stories of how they used to fish before regulations ruined the fun. One man, Mr. Harrington, age 84, even donated a collection of vintage fishing poles. I built a storage bench by the dock to house them all. The lake was no longer a weapon. It had become a sanctuary. Just when I thought things had settled, I received a call from a number I couldn't ignore, Sharon Fletcher. Her voice was quieter than I remembered. Clint, I wanted to congratulate you. You've done something special. I didn't respond. She added, I also wanted to say goodbye. I'm moving to Florida next month. My sister needs care and I think I need a reset. She hesitated. I was wrong about a lot of things. I didn't gloat. I hope Florida treats you better than Ridge Lake did, I said. And I hope you find your peace. The next day, I walked the lake trail one last time before the club launch. The grass was greener. The water calmer. Ridge Lake wasn't perfect, but it had healed. And maybe I had too. A man once fined for casting a hook was now casting hope into his neighborhood. And for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly who I was. The first Ridge Lake Fishing Club meeting drew nearly 50 people. Kids bouncing with energy, retirees grinning ear to ear, young couples eager to try something different. I had no idea it would get that big. But one person stood out among them, a quiet boy around 10, with a baseball cap too big for his head and no fishing gear of his own. He kept his distance, watching everyone cast lines, his eyes glowing but his hands empty. I walked over and crouched beside him. Name's Clint. You fished before? He shook his head. I just like the water. I handed him one of Mr. Harrington's vintage rods and showed him how to cast. His small fingers trembled a bit, but he caught on quick. After his third try, his bobber danced, then dipped. You got one. I yelled. The boy reeled hard, eyes wide, and pulled up a sunfish not bigger than his hand. The crowd cheered like he'd landed a marlin. His grin lit up the lake. You ever seen a fish before? I asked, laughing. Only in books, he said softly. Mom works nights. I don't get out much. That moment, something shifted in me. His name was Darius. He and his mom, Keisha, had just moved into a rental on Maple Row. She worked double shifts at the hospital, and Darius mostly stayed indoors. He used to draw lakes, Keisha told me later, almost embarrassed. Said he wanted to visit one someday. I didn't even know we had one nearby. She teared up. You gave him his first fish, Mr. Marlowe. That night, I stared out at the lake thinking about all the people this water had quietly waited for. It had always been ready to heal someone. Now it had found Darius. I made Darius an honorary junior member of the club. Gave him a tackle box with his name carved into it and his own fishing hat. You're official now, I said. His smile was bigger than the lake. But the real surprise came 2 weeks later, when he won the first Ridge Lake catch and release tournament, beating grown men with a 6-pound bass he caught at sunrise. He's got magic, someone said. Kid's a natural. That afternoon, Darius walked up to me and whispered, when I'm grown, I'm gonna own a lake too. I choked up. That's when I knew, this wasn't just about water anymore. This was legacy. Keisha began stopping by the dock every Saturday before work, bringing snacks for the kids and folding chairs for the parents. I didn't think a neighborhood could feel like this, she said once. Back in our old place, everyone stayed behind locked doors. I nodded. Sometimes it takes one open gate to change everything. News of the club spread beyond Ridge Lake. Other neighborhoods asked if they could visit. A school emailed me about field trips. Even the county sent a certificate recognizing Marlow Lake as a site of community impact. That piece of paper meant more than the $500,000 offer ever did. But not everyone was happy. A group of longtime residents began whispering about too much noise, too many outsiders, and too many changes. It started small, passive-aggressive comments during meetings. It's great what you're doing, but don't you think it's getting out of hand? Then came the anonymous notes in my mailbox. We didn't move here for chaos. This isn't a park. HOA rules existed for a reason. I brought it up at the next board meeting. Are we really doing this again? I asked. Is Ridge Lake going backward now? Liza shook her head. It's a few loud voices, Clint. But most people love what's happening. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. Change always had enemies. And those enemies were starting to regroup. I had turned the lake into a sanctuary, but now some wanted it silent again. Like before. Like when fear ruled and Sharon sat at the top. That week, someone vandalized the dock. The new sign was torn down. Hooks and bait scattered across the planks. Darius's name was scratched off his tackle box. I stared at it in disbelief. The lake shimmered quietly in the sun, unaware that hatred had crept close again. When Darius arrived and saw the damage, his face crumbled. Did I do something wrong? He asked. My chest ached. No, kid. Some folks just don't like happiness. I promised him we'd rebuild. Bigger. Stronger. Louder. I wasn't letting cowards take this back. I held a meeting at my house the next day, unofficial but packed. They want us to quit, I said. They think if they scare us, we'll stop showing up. But the lake doesn't belong to fear anymore. It belongs to us. People cheered. Keisha stood up and offered to help repaint the dock. Mr. Harrington volunteered his tools. Even Greg returned, holding new fishing line. I'm not proud of who I was, he said, but I want to be part of what this place is becoming. The next morning, we rebuilt. By evening, the dock looked brand new. We painted Darius's name in bold white letters across the bench. A new sign read, "Welcome to Marlowe Lake, built by community. Protected by love." That weekend, we held a Reclaim the Lake cookout. Over 100 people showed up. There were kites, music, fireflies, and dancing. And there was Darius, holding up his newly restored tackle box, grinning like a boy who had reclaimed more than just a fishing rod. He'd reclaimed joy. We all had. Still, the tension lingered beneath the surface. I knew someone out there was plotting, watching, waiting for a chance to push back again. And I had a sinking feeling they weren't just whispering anymore. It started with a whisper in the grocery store aisle. I was picking up charcoal for the next Saturday cookout when Patty nudged me by the bread rack. "Clint," she said softly, "you didn't hear this from me, but they're planning something." A few of the old board members met last night at Greg's cousin's place. Not a formal meeting. A secret one. I paused mid-reach for the mustard. Who's they? She hesitated. The ones who think the lake's become too public. Who want to take back the neighborhood. They're talking about rewriting bylaws. Quietly. My heart thudded in my chest. A secret meeting? That's how it always starts. Change creeping in through whispers and closed doors. I thanked her and left my cart in the aisle. By the time I reached home, I was pacing the porch. I checked the HOA group email. Nothing. No official meeting notices. No board memos. Just silence. That night, I drove past Greg's cousin's house 2 streets over. 7 cars parked out front. Lights on in the back room. I sat in the dark, engine off, anger growing. The same people I forgave were now sharpening new knives. The next morning, I confronted Greg. "You hosting secret revolts now?" I asked bluntly. His face dropped. "Clint, it's not like that." "Then what is it like?" I snapped. "Because I'm hearing you're planning to undo everything we built." Greg sighed. "Look, some of the older families feel like the neighborhood's slipping away. Too many new faces. Too much change. They want rules again." I folded my arms. Rules that tell kids like Darius to go back inside? He looked down. "No one's saying that." "They don't have to," I said. "They're trying to bring Sharon back, just without her name." I brought it to the next official HOA meeting. "There are attempts to call unauthorized gatherings," I said. "If you have something to say it here. Not in backyards under cover of night." The room was split. Some nodded in agreement. Others looked away. Liza leaned forward. Let's vote, she said. Do we recommit to the new bylaws, open lake access, no discriminatory fines, full transparency? The vote passed, but barely. 3 votes to 2. The crack had started, and I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet. The next day, I found a letter taped to my door. Your lake doesn't belong to you anymore. You gave it away. We'll take it back. It wasn't signed. The handwriting was sloppy. I reported it to the police again. They filed it, offered to keep an eye out. But there's only so much law can do when enemies are your neighbors. I reinforced the dock cameras, installed motion sensors around the trail, and added a lockbox to Darius's tackle bench. It was no longer just about joy. It was about protection. That weekend, fewer people came to the lake. Some still fished. Others stopped by but left quickly. Whispers had spread that trouble was brewing. The tension was thicker than summer heat. Darius still came every Saturday. He sat quietly, cast his line, and waited. They're mad again, huh? He asked one morning. I nodded. Some folks don't like peace when it doesn't look like what they're used to. Darius shrugged. That's dumb. The fish don't care who we are. I laughed, but his words stuck with me. Maybe that's why we fish, to be reminded what equality looks like. Then came the petition. A formal one, slid under every door in the neighborhood. It was titled, Motion to Rezone Lake for Controlled HOA Use. It proposed rewriting the original agreement with the county, attempting to override the lake's private status by citing community necessity. It was slick, legal-sounding, and dangerous. They'd hired a new lawyer, someone from Atlanta this time. I stared at the paper in my hands, heart pounding. This wasn't just a whisper anymore. This was war. I called Jalen. They're trying to rezone my lake, I said. He whistled. That's bold. But unless the county agrees, they've got nothing. They're spreading fear, I said, calling me unstable, saying I've brought outsiders into a residential space. Jalen growled. Sounds like code for racism and classism. You need to get ahead of this. We crafted a counterpetition that same night. But I didn't title it with legalese. I called it, Let the Lake Stay Free. No jargon. Just photos of kids fishing, families laughing, Darius holding his first bass. I spent the next 3 days knocking on every door in Ridge Lake. Even the ones I knew were against me. I'm not here to argue, I told them. I'm here to remind you why this lake mattered in the first place. Some slammed the door. Others listened. A few cried. When I handed Darius the final clipboard, he said, Can I be the last signature? I nodded. He scrawled his name proudly. Done, he said. Let's win. And suddenly, I didn't feel tired anymore. At the next community meeting, I walked to the podium and held up both petitions. One of these is built on fear, I said. The other, on truth. Choose wisely. I handed the documents to Liza for counting. 20 minutes later, she stood up, hands trembling. Clint's petition has 89 signatures. The rezoning one has 34. The lake remains private. Cheers erupted. Tears flowed. The whisper campaign had failed. For now. But as the crowd celebrated, I saw something that chilled me. Across the room, one man didn't cheer. He didn't clap. He just stared at me. Cold, unreadable. A stranger. I'd never seen him before. And I had no idea what he was planning next. I couldn't shake the image of him. Tall, gray windbreaker, sunglasses despite it being evening, standing stone still in the back of the clubhouse like he owned the air around him. He didn't clap. Didn't move. Just watched me. And when the meeting ended and people started filing out, he was gone. No car, no hello, no trace. I asked Liza if she saw him. She hadn't. I checked the sign-in sheet, no new names. Something about that silence felt louder than any protest I'd faced. And I had the sinking feeling the lake war wasn't over, it was evolving. The next morning, I found a business card on my mailbox. Colton Rayburn, Land Acquisition Specialist. No logo. Just a number. No message. Just his name. I Googled it. He wasn't just any land agent, he was a high-level fixer for developers. The kind who didn't care about communities or memories. He flipped farmland, rezoned parks, bulldozed whatever stood in the way of a bigger paycheck. I paced the kitchen, heart pounding. If he was here, then someone had escalated this battle to a new level. It wasn't about Sharon or board votes anymore. Someone with real money wanted this lake, and they just hired a shark. I didn't call the number. I called Jalen. Rayburn's involved, I told him. Jalen paused. Now that's a problem. What can he do? I asked. Pressure the county. Find legal cracks. Offer neighbors huge payouts to turn against you. Maybe even claim environmental noncompliance. He plays long games. That night, I reviewed every county document, every email, every title page. I wasn't just defending water. I was defending a legacy. But Colton Rayburn had done this before. And he usually won. The next week, subtle things started happening. An anonymous call to zoning claimed illegal structures on the lake. A city inspector showed up, clipboard in hand, citing safety concerns about the dock. An envelope arrived with no return address, just printed words. So, while you still can. I called the county office. We've been getting complaints, the clerk said flatly. But the lake's yours. Unless you're doing anything unpermitted, you're fine. For now. Still, I couldn't sleep that night. I stood on the dock at midnight, flashlight in hand, watching fog roll across the water like ghost breath. I heard footsteps on gravel. Spun around, nothing. Just wind. Just trees. Just my heart pounding like a drum in a war I didn't ask for. The next morning, my mailbox was smashed in. My tires slashed. I filed police reports. But they shrugged. No witnesses. No footage. Could have been kids. I installed new cameras. Motion detecting, infrared, backed up to the cloud. Then I did something bold. I printed a photo of Darius holding his first fish and stapled it to the bulletin board with a handwritten message. To whoever wants to scare me, this boy matters more than your offers. That post went viral in the neighborhood app. Dozens commented. Dozens more came by to shake my hand. We held another community cookout that weekend. Bigger than ever. But I kept watching the tree line. Then, during cleanup, I found Colton Rayburn standing by the dock, hands in his coat pockets. Just waiting. I walked over, jaw tight. You lost? I asked. He didn't flinch. No, Mr. Marlowe. I'm exactly where I mean to be. He looked at the lake, not me. It's beautiful. And it's in the way. I stepped closer. You think threatening people will get you what you want? He finally turned to me. His smile was razor thin. You misunderstand. I don't threaten. I offer. He pulled out a folder. 900,000. Final offer. You walk away. We pave paradise. Everyone wins. I didn't even touch the folder. You think money's the only language people speak? He shrugged. It's the loudest. And when your tires get slashed again, or the next inspection finds fault, or a lawsuit shows up over a rusted nail on your dock, you'll listen. I held my ground. You came here thinking this lake was just water. But it's not. It's roots. It's memories. It's peace. And peace doesn't sell. I turned and walked away, heart beating through my ribs. Behind me, he said only, everyone sells eventually, Clint. One way or another. By the following week, residents began getting calls. Anonymous buyers offering cash over market value for their homes. Just enough to tempt, just vague enough to spook. Keisha got one. So did Liza. They want to buy the neighborhood out from under you, Jalen warned. If enough people sell, the HOA flips. Then zoning pressure starts. Then condemnation threats. Classic playbook. I sat at my kitchen table, hands clenched. Then we rewrite the story, I said. We don't back down. We band together. I called a full neighborhood assembly. Not at the clubhouse. At the lake. I brought microphones, speakers, and a big white sign that said, "This is ours, let's keep it that way." Hundreds showed up. People brought lawn chairs, dogs, flags, and kids. Darius stood beside me, holding his tackle box. I took the mic. They think they can buy our silence, I said. They think this water's worth more paved. That our kids, our memories, our mornings on this dock are for sale. But they're wrong. Because Ridge Lake doesn't belong to fear anymore. It belongs to all of us. Thunderous applause. Cheers. Tears. But in the very back, beyond the crowd, Colton Rayburn watched. Still, silent. Smiling. The crowd at the lake had roared like a lion, but lions can still be hunted. And that's what Colton Rayburn was doing now, one house at a time. Within days of the assembly, 4 for sale signs popped up. Then 3 more. Quietly. Without warning. I knocked on doors. Some neighbors wouldn't answer. Others cracked their blinds but said nothing. Greg finally admitted it. They offered me double market value, he whispered. My wife's been dying to move closer to her sister in Raleigh. It's hard to say no to that kind of money, Clint. I didn't blame him. Not really. That kind of cash can fix a lot of old dreams. But every house that sold was a brick taken out of the wall we'd built together. If enough fell, the lake wouldn't just be threatened, it'd be erased. The developer only needed 40% of homeowners to sell before they could submit a rezoning initiative to the county. By week's end, they had 12%. I called Liza and Brant to my house. We need to make a stand, I said. Not with signs. Not with speeches. With paperwork. Let's form the Ridge Lake Preservation Trust. It wasn't easy. We worked late nights, filing paperwork, writing mission statements, registering as a non-profit land trust. Our goal was simple: protect the lake and surrounding area from development through collective ownership and legal safeguards. We launched a fundraiser online with Darius's photo at the top and the caption, "Let the water stay wild." Within 72 hours, donations started pouring in. Not just from Ridge Lake, but from across Georgia. People who'd grown up fishing. Retirees who'd lost their lakes to parking lots. School teachers. Grandparents. Even strangers. The story had touched a nerve. Then came the article. The man who bought a lake to defy the HOA now battles developers. It went viral. I did a local TV interview. Shared Darius's story. Talked about legacy, community, and peace. The response was overwhelming. But not everyone liked the attention. The next night, my tires were slashed again. A brick was thrown through my window with a note tied to it. "This isn't your lake anymore." I didn't call the police. I called a welder. Installed steel mesh gates across the dock path. Strengthened the camera network. And made a vow: they could tear down my house, but they'd never touch the heart of this lake. Then came the hardest blow of all. Keisha knocked on my door one evening, eyes puffy. "Clint," she said, voice shaking, "I got a call. They offered me enough to pay off all my debt. Darius's college. Everything." I felt the air leave the room. "You're not selling, are you?" I asked. She stared at the floor. I told them no. But it's getting harder to explain to a 10-year-old why his mama has to say no to a better life. She looked up. "I believe in what you're doing. But I need help. I can't carry this alone." That night, I posted a photo of Keisha and Darius fishing, along with a message. They're not just buying property, they're trying to buy silence. Help us protect the people who stood by us. Within a day, the fundraiser exploded past $100,000. An anonymous donor, who turned out to be a retired NFL player, donated $50,000. "I used to fish with my dad before he passed," he wrote. "Let the kid fish." Keisha wept when I told her. "We're not moving," she said. "We're building." That same night, Darius drew a picture of the lake and handed it to me. At the top it said, "Home is where you fish with friends." But then came the HOA emergency vote. A handful of the remaining old guard board members, encouraged by the new property owners, filed a motion to dissolve the HOA entirely. "It's too divided," one of them claimed. "Let the developer take over and start fresh." If passed, the HOA would sell its assets, including the old clubhouse and surrounding land, to the development company. The vote was set for the following Tuesday. I had one weekend left. One last chance to keep Ridge Lake from being wiped off the map. I spent that weekend knocking on doors. Rain or shine. I didn't beg, I reminded. "You chose this place for peace," I told them. Don't trade it for pavement. Some listened. Others had already packed. Still, the movement grew. Kids chalked messages on sidewalks. Save our lake. Don't sell the water. Let Darius fish. Tuesday night came like a storm cloud. The clubhouse was packed. Divided. Tense. I stood at the front. Took a deep breath. This isn't about politics, I said. This is about memory. About the right to sit by still water and feel free. Once it's gone, you can't buy it back. Oh no. Let the lake live. The room fell silent. The ballots were cast. We waited. And waited. Liza stepped forward with the results. 49 votes to dissolve. 52 votes to preserve. The HOA stands. The lake remains untouched. Cheers. Shouts. People hugged. Some cried. But in the back corner of the room, Colton Rayburn stood again. And he was smiling. I thought the vote had ended everything. But Colton Rayburn's smile told me otherwise. He didn't need to win every battle, he only needed one opportunity. The next morning, I received an official letter from the county. Notice of environmental review. Potential soil contamination, Ridge Lake water body. I stood in my driveway, hands shaking. This was his move. A formal review meant the lake could be flagged as hazardous, forcing closure, maybe even sale. Whether it was real or not didn't matter. Rayburn had the power to plant doubt, and doubt is sometimes all it takes to sink something beautiful. I called Jalen. Can they shut me down? I asked. He sighed. If they can prove contamination, yes. But more likely, it's a stall tactic. They'll drag it out. We need evidence that the lake is clean. Independent labs. Fast. I drove 3 hours to a university lab and paid out of pocket for a rush test. I gathered samples myself, water, sediment, fish. I stayed up 3 nights reading environmental law. I wasn't just a homeowner anymore. I was a guardian. And this was my final stand. The results came back in 48 hours. No lead. No runoff. No contaminants. The lake was clean. I held the papers like a badge. Marched into the county office. Dropped them on the desk. This lake's cleaner than your courthouse bathroom, I said. The clerk smirked and stamped the report. That's official then. No further action. It was done. Rayburn's last card had been burned. But I still hadn't seen him. Until 2 days later. He showed up at the dock again. Uninvited, untouched, smug. Congratulations, he said. You won. I didn't speak. You must feel proud. All that work, all that sweat. Just to keep a pond. I stepped toward him. It's not a pond. It's the soul of this place. He tilted his head. You're right. And you've turned it into a symbol. You know what happens to symbols, Clint? People fight over them forever. He turned to leave, but paused. This war's over. But the world's full of other lakes. Enjoy your victory, for now. Then he walked away. And I never saw him again. 2 months later, Ridge Lake bloomed. The Preservation Trust bought up empty lots to protect the shoreline. The HOA rewrote the bylaws with full transparency. The dock expanded. We added benches, solar lights, even a wooden arch with the words, Marlow Lake, cast peace forward. Darius became our youth fishing ambassador, leading monthly lessons for neighborhood kids. Keisha helped organize community cleanups and holiday events. Greg opened a little bait shop in his garage. Ridge Lake wasn't just safe, it was thriving. The greatest surprise came on a crisp October morning. I was standing by the water, coffee in hand, when Darius ran up holding a letter. Mr. Clint. Look. It was from the state governor's office. Dear Mr. Marlowe, you are hereby recognized with the Georgia Civic Impact Award for Community Preservation. Enclosed was a small brass plaque. I held it, stunned. Not for the honor, but because it meant the story had reached further than we ever imagined. I hugged Darius. This is for all of us, I said. You, your mom, this lake, this fight. He looked at the water and whispered, I knew it'd stay ours. That weekend, we held one final celebration to mark the 1-year anniversary of the first fishing fine. I grilled burgers. Brant brought fireworks. Even Mr. Harrington danced to bluegrass under the moonlight. We called it the Freedom to Fish Festival. 100 neighbors lined the water's edge. Music played, laughter echoed, and under the stars, every cast into that still lake felt like defiance, joy, and healing all in one. Later that night, I stood on the dock alone. The breeze rippled across the water. I cast one final line, not to catch anything, but to remember. To remember that revenge might spark the fire, but it's love that keeps it burning. I thought about Sharon, about Rayburn, about fear, greed, and the weight of silence. And then I thought about Darius, his smile, his little fingers reeling in that first fish. And I knew, this wasn't just a story about fishing. It was a story about freedom,